They call it failure when your body gives out. When you hit the ground, shaking, breathless. But what they don't see is that moment is sacred. It's where effort becomes art, where pain becomes proof. You collapsed, not because you're weak, but because you had the courage to go there. You touched the edge of yourself. And through that struggle, earned the right to rise anew. Last week, I got the opportunity to train with Eric. And although now I call Eric a friend, at the time, I knew of him merely as the trainer or engine behind some of the names in fitness and personal development that I looked up to the most. Right? The man silently behind the scenes pushes others to find more in themselves. One of my favorite examples being he is the spotter and trainer in the infamous David Goggins video when David's yelling, "Who's gonna carry the boats?" I refer to these people as Hamiltonian, as they're somewhat behind the scenes, right? But pulling strings and shaping reality as it appears on stage. No one wins alone, right? And Eric is that support for so many. Your win is his win. Your breakthrough is his breakthrough. And so when I was asked to train with him, it was an obvious no-brainer. Let's see how hard we can stretch things. Let's push some boundaries today. I show up. He introduces himself, explains a bit about the process, and says, Eddie, we're about to go on a journey. I want you to imagine you're in a race car. Pick a color. Okay, I say, certainly intrigued. We'll go black and teal. Great. Now, Eddie, I want you to picture someone you love riding shotgun with you. Can you do that? Sure. I close my eyes for a second. Got it. Okay, perfect. So, Eddie, when you are at your lowest point, when you're really fighting, I want you to imagine that person's face, and I want you to do it for them. Because we don't just grow and evolve for ourselves. We push and we stretch for those we love the most. Those counting on us, those depending on us. Got it. And note that I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he ends the intro with, what we're going to do today is earn our failure. And this little piece right here is what I saw as absolutely transformative. Right? We're going to earn our failure. He continues, Eddie, I've worked with some of the biggest names on earth, the fittest people on earth. All of them have failed. All of them. And that right there is the magic, the beauty. When we fail, we change. We become that much closer to the divine. When we earn our failure, we give ourselves permission to grow. When we fail, life begins. So today, this morning, how about we earn our failure? Let's go. So we stretch and jump right into the workout, beginning with what I'm guessing is 15 to 20 minutes of squats, jump squats, lunges, all lower body stuff. And, I think to myself immediately, this is my strength, right? I'm confident. Going back to the 4 years of rowing in college that has become to this day sort of a foundation for my physical abilities. Metabolic conditioning, no problem, right? At least that was the story in my head. But we lock in, start the intervals, and sure enough, while the confidence was great, I quickly realized that none of that mattered. After about 6 minutes, my entire body was screaming. Quads were spasming in active rebellion. Probably been about 10 years since I'd gone that long without a single momentary pause, without a break. And he's screaming the entire time, Eddie, let yourself fail. You've got this. Fail. In my mind, there was this defense mechanism without even realizing it. When my body was at the brink of failure, I would do these little bounces or pulses at the bottom of a hold to mitigate tension, or I would adjust slightly enough that the pain and the weight could be redistributed. I come from the school of, it doesn't matter how you get there, just figure out a damn way. And, there's certainly a time and a place for that. But the vulnerability, the nakedness of staying locked into something until you physically collapse and fall, that was tough. My mind desperately wanted to prevent failure every time it felt itself getting close. Every time it could feel the pulsing resistance getting stronger and stronger. If it weren't for Eric's reoccurring screams, let yourself fail, Eddie, I would have probably buried the notion as I attempted to adjust my way through the hell I was experiencing. Let yourself fail. Earn that failure. Gift yourself that failure. Again and again and again. Moved on to 20 minutes or so of core, straight abs, no breaks, no rest. And anyone who's done something like this probably knows that, sure, your abs obviously get worked. But kind of an unknown thing is that after minutes of flutter kicks and bicycles and leg raises, so on and so forth, your legs get heavy. And again, my brain said, no, not on my watch, right? Without even realizing it, I would attempt to flutter kick, holding up my legs with my hands, right? Refusing to let them hit the ground. That is until I heard the words, let them fall, Eddie. Let them hit the ground. Let yourself fail. And so I let go of control. I let them fall, and fall they did, giving me about a 3-second reprieve from the chaos before I gathered myself and entered the fight again. And again and again. I think I probably failed 4 or 5 times. But rising each time, collecting myself, reframing the experience, and carrying on. Segment by segment, exercise by exercise, we got through it. Finally, we stood up, sat against the padded wall in the gym, and talked about the session, talked about life. And I quickly realized perhaps the line separating the two was finer than I may have realized. We don't give ourselves permission to expand until we earn failure in our lives. Until we travel out to the brink of who we are and let ourselves hit the ground. Until we carry so much weight that it ultimately levels us. Because every time we start again, not only are we a little bit stronger, but we begin to realize that if that was the worst case, that if I swallowed my pride, let it all come crashing down, and still I rose, still I asked for more, still I showed up, what can stop me? What out there is bigger than me? What out there is so scary that it can halt my upward trajectory? The challenge is, and always will be, finding the strength to let yourself, to not hedge, to not look for off-ramps, to not hold yourself up, but for a time, fully disassemble. Have you ever been driving and reminded yourself to relax your muscles? Let your shoulders down, loosen up your back. And you realize how tight you were, right? How you were holding yourself up. Deep inhale, and with the exhale, you intentionally relax. Let it all sort of melt. That tension we didn't even realize was there until it crossed our mind. I think the same thing is true when it comes to the vulnerability of failure. We often, without knowing it, want to shield or protect ourselves from it, right? The natural thing is to be safe. We are biologically designed for safety above all. But the thing is, in order to water the seed that is your infinite upside, you cannot be, quote unquote, safe. You can't stay in the middle, insulated from the chaos and turbulence of the outer edge. We must walk to the periphery of what we know, to the edge of who we are, and allow ourselves to fail, to earn that chance to gain strength and composure, to break down our worldview and self-image so that it can be rebuilt. I promise you, it's there. It's there for me, it's there for you. And it is the bridge connecting where you are now to where you can be. And so the question is not, how do we move forward while avoiding failure? The question is, how do we earn failure again and again? How do we reprogram our minds to see it as a beautiful necessity, a step forward? Falling while continuously standing tall and marching towards that horizon with trust and conviction, trust in the process and trust in ourselves. Because in a world where falling is scoffed at, right, looked down upon and considered a negative, only a few, a select few, a great few, see through it, find the strength to accept it and embrace it. And I think that's the question we're playing with here. Will you be vulnerable enough to let your legs surrender to gravity and your body hit the floor? In a world where biologically we want comfort and societally we're inclined to merely tiptoe through life, will you choose to earn your failure?
Thank you for this moment. Thank you for the spirit. Thank you for the blood, the love, the strength, allowing us to connect, dive into the deeper connection with this.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Your World Within podcast. I'm Eddie Pinero, and I'd love to know one way that you are earning failure in your life. What's one area where you're pushing towards the periphery in order to collapse and rebuild? So this next segment is going to explore the idea a little bit further, but it's going to talk about why there's so much friction and resistance towards failure, and most importantly, what we can do about it.
Why do you have to earn failure?
You earn failure because it's not an easy thing to do to seek it out. And I think socially, biologically, there's so much friction and resistance to being vulnerable enough to try something and fall flat on your face. And so earning failure is like, congrats, you found the courage to push yourself to the max of what you're capable of in this moment, or the max of what you know, exceed that and fall down. So many people, and I'm gonna say the vast, they say what, 78.7% of statistics are made up on the spot, right? So 99% of the world doesn't gift themselves the opportunity to fall on their face because they're worried about what that will bring. So they stay conservative in their own little world, and they stay with what they know and live a life that reflects that. Earning failure is finding the courage to go out, crash and burn, and get up like that phoenix from the ashes.
How do you flip that switch in your mind? Like, some people think of failure as a negative.
It is, I mean, I think the question is asked perfectly because it is a switch that has to be flipped. Failure is not a negative, it's the key to anything positive in your life. Failure is just iterating. It's trying things, understanding what doesn't work, looking at the data, and going again and again and again and again and again and again. So that's why people talk about, success requiring failure. The greats in any industry, in any walk of life, without exception, had the courage and the vulnerability to go try those things.
All right, so we've talked a lot about failure, not as an adversary, right, but as an invitation into something greater. This next segment expands upon that and says, yeah, but how do you earn failure in your business? And how do you earn failure creatively when you're drawing, writing, making music? How do you earn failure on the court or the field? All right, I talk about a friend sending me a very important message where he says, essentially, if you want to be creative, you can't play scared. You can't worry about failure. You can't worry about perception. Creative flow is freedom, right? And so this next segment explores just that. The other day, a good friend of mine sent me a message that was exactly what I needed to hear, exactly when I needed to hear it. And more or less, it's a paraphrasing of a quote that says, if you're going to be creative, you have to be in a state of play. And you can't be in a state of play if you're fearful, if you're worried about messing up or making mistakes. Here's something interesting I've observed. In order to build something, you have to be creative. In a way, intentionally reckless. You have to take risks and put yourself out there. And then hopefully after some time living this way, the milestones begin to accumulate. But, and this is the shift I've noticed in myself, the more you accomplish, or the closer you get to that goal, the more your brain wants to transition from creative to protector. From being bold to conserving. We want to hold on to what we've brought to life more than we want to innovate. It's protect the castle on the hill that was, ironically, born of your creativity to begin with. And I know this isn't the way I want to live. But nevertheless, it's true. It's an example of me finding myself fighting with my biological wiring. Hey, courage got you here. It waters the seed of growth. It brought forth transformation. Abandoning it is a spiritual death wish. Yet, if I let myself run on default mode, and I know a lot of us are the same, courage just so happens to be the very first thing to go. And so the question reverts back to, if you really want more of the excitement, more of the growth, the beauty in conquering life's obstacles, the meaning in diving headfirst into chaos so that it can be tamed and channeled, how do we place ourselves back into that state of play? That perpetual state of play. Back before I started my own business, I was working in the corporate world, creating onboarding curriculums for new hires in the insurance industry. I would explain to kids out of college the basic ins and outs of the industry and why it was relevant. And one of the key ideas was risk mitigation. That's what insurance is, right? It's diversification of risk. I even think about it now. When I see my cell phone, close to the edge of a countertop, my brain goes, no. And I go to pick it up, place it to the center of the table or in my pocket. where the likelihood of a $1,500 device falling and exploding on the kitchen floor is greatly reduced. And that's a good thing. Time and place, for sure. But in our personal lives, it also happens that the beauty, the fun, the excitement, and the growth takes place on the counter's edge. It is dancing through life's fringes that we find ourselves. There's some truth to the idea that, hey, we might fall from the countertop and crash onto the floor, and you know what? Fine. Be at peace with that possibility. It's not a call for recklessness, but a reminder that a life fully lived is inherently more risky than one where you are safe. See, life is a game of trade-offs. Innovation comes from play. Play is not safe because there is a largely increased likelihood of mistakes. There's freedom, there's exploration. It's removing the guardrails and immersing yourself into life. And if you feel stuck, or that life has become mundane, perhaps it's because risk mitigation has taken the wheel and play has found itself in the back seat. Maybe it's that simple. Maybe it's time to step outside and live again. To remember that play brings with it its mistakes, sure. But contrary to what our lizard brains want us to think, most mistakes are reversible. And using that same little metaphor, one's phone falling onto the floor and shattering doesn't mean a person can never make a call, send a text, or use social media again, right? It's a temporary inconvenience in the grand scheme of things until they normalize. I think we want to live in a manner that makes possible the upside, not one that hides us away and reduces the potential downside. Again, the quote, if you're going to be creative, you have to be in a state of play, and you can't be in a state of play if you're being careful, if you're trying not to make mistakes. So take some time and think. Ask the questions that, if you don't ask yourself, they'll very likely go unanswered forever. What does play mean to you? What does it look like? And is it time for you to step back into that feeling? You being here alive today comes with odds said to be 1 in 400 trillion. Essentially impossible. If you want to look around for miracles, look no further than the mirror. And so don't lock yourself away until that ride expires. Don't spend your time protecting mediocrity. Step outside and cash in that check. Invite the play, the uncertainty, the mistakes, and the growth. Because as far as I know, there is no situation where one regrets inviting into their soul more of life. So why is there so much friction around failure? You know, I talked about my, even subconsciously, desire to pull back from it, to keep myself from failing. I think it's a complex question. I think there's many reasons, but one of them, and this is not going to be any surprise to anyone here, is that the public or the perception of others is painful, right? We don't want to be criticized or laughed at. When we fall or fail, especially in a public way, it's embarrassing. It hurts the ego. And so that stops us from going in a lot of ways. In this next segment, called Loved or Hated But Never Ignored, or Never Simply Tolerated, talks about why it's beautiful to get that resistance. If you push yourself, if you go to the periphery, if you fall down and get back up, growing yourself, evolving, just living in your authenticity, there are gonna be people that love you for it, and there will be people that hate you for it. That is life in the big city. You're never gonna be loved by everybody. It's a sign that you're alive and you're being you. What you don't want is to be simply tolerated, to live in the shadows, to never make a mark, to just quietly exist because you're too scared to fall in front of people, right? So this is that reminder, hey, it's okay to be hated. It's great to be loved, but never be simply tolerated. Be loved or be hated, but never simply tolerated. In life, you can live to chase opportunity, or you can live to avoid failure. And there are two very different things. Rather than pursue, we often avoid. We avoid failure. We avoid criticism. We don't want to ruffle feathers or disrupt. No, we choose to simply exist. Never condemned, but never extraordinary. Just tolerated. And it's an interesting dilemma. Because the best things exist on the extremes, life's fringes. That's where you find your accolades, your accomplishments. That's what we celebrate. It's where you need to be. And you get there not by worrying about what everyone around you thinks, but by taking your strength, your unique self, holding on and pressing the pedal to the floor, going all in. And yeah, that means suddenly, my friend, you are exposed. You are vulnerable. You are now out there. It means those who don't have the courage to chase their dreams, they will find you threatening and they will let you know. But it also means that the shackles are off. The door is open, the light is green, and you can build from the ground up. You can build the life you want. The finish line has now become more visible than the prospect of falling along the way, and you've granted yourself permission to run through it. Sure, some will love you for these accomplishments, some will hate you for these accomplishments, but let me reiterate the word accomplishment. Because when you live to be invisible, it's a term that rarely presents itself, I promise. Life, it rewards the bold. Those who are bold in their beliefs, bold in their actions, their dreams, and their pursuits. They are not for anyone but you. And years later, when you look in the mirror, you'll know that you gave every single thing you had to a life that meant something to you. Loved, yes. Hated, sure. But merely tolerated, no. All right, well, we have reached the last segment, and this one's great. Kind of puts a bow on everything. You know, we talked a lot about that sort of friction and that difficulty in allowing ourselves to fall, to be that vulnerable. Well, this segment called The Paradox of Life explains why so many things don't make sense, how so many things we need to do are paradoxical, right? How from our pain comes our purpose, how from falling and collapsing we're able to rebuild, how stepping into the unknown with no answers is how we find our answers. Right? It is in doing the things that we're often most scared to do, that we least want to do, that we're able to uncover the best of ourselves. So, without further ado, this segment is called The Paradox of Life. When our backs are against the wall, we're forced to become more. When the clock is ticking, we are tasked with finding answers that hide among us. It's in the darkness we find light, and while lost, we find ourselves. The paradox of life is that from our pain comes our purpose, our evolution, and our greatness. I love thinking back to about 2014, making my way around Boston, having just quit my job, essentially purposeless, clinging to a YouTube channel and a podcast idea that I would name Your World Within. And why? Why do I think back? Why does this mean everything to me? Well, because at the time, I knew nothing. I understood nothing. Nothing about speaking or media, audio, video, nothing about running a business. But more importantly, I knew very little about life and what's truly required to progress in a world with infinite moving parts. I didn't know that my lack of understanding is what made everything feel overwhelming and complex, and that it was up to me to simplify. I didn't know the extent to which I'd have to befriend failure. And that was the most eye-opening realization. Because when you gravitate towards a risk-free existence and you box yourself in, as I had for so long, of course you don't get the upside, but you also don't fail as dramatically either. Life was a simple game of cause and effect. Do work, get result, not much room for more than that. And so stepping outside that box in the way that I did changed some rules. I learned some things. First, you can spend time on something, you can exhaust energy on something, and get nothing in the short term for your efforts. And I mean nothing. Unless you count getting your pride stomped on. Unless you count your friends disappearing when you need them most. Unless you count self-doubt and a constant worry about not amounting to anything. I mean, these are very raw, very real human emotions. They tend to arise when we start something new, but in them is also the power. This is where the light bulb turns on and the path emerges. It's where I learned that we only get what we want when we endure what we don't. And what a foreign concept when you think about it, right? It's like, Eddie, take this mic. Go stand in front of this audience and pour your heart out. Your knees are shaking, chest is pounding, but dude, trust me, it'll be good for you. And funny enough, it was. It was because the fear in my stomach became the indicator that something new, something exciting, something more was around the corner. Like Pavlov's dog hearing that bell, anytime the fear kicked in, I could feel myself getting closer to something meaningful, to a higher version of myself. The pain is an invite. The sheer terror, and let's face it, that's what it feels like sometimes, it's an upgrade. Disguised as the monster that you think you should be running from. When it is, as I recently mentioned, the adversary you should befriend. We have to change our relationship with discomfort because our initial understanding, the one that comes stock in our minds, is never sufficient to build anything of significance. Its default setting is to preserve the now, not expand it. And so just like those stock speakers that came in my 1999 Ford F-150 when I was in my early 20s, let's rip it out. Let's customize. Let's upgrade the quality of the sound we hear and the things we say to ourselves. What an advantage it is to know that the hard things are what make us level up. To find that awareness. What a blessing that when life's difficulty startles and scatters the masses, you could be the one that remains, standing tall, seeking out the advantage amidst the commotion. Every little act of courage becomes more and more meaningful, powerful. But we must lose ourselves to find ourselves. We must embrace our fears if we are to become courageous. We must fail in order to succeed. And sure, sometimes the price seems steep. But I promise, not going costs more. Wishing costs more. If onlys cost more. So maybe for you it isn't a YouTube channel or a speaking career. Maybe it's something totally different. But it is something. And should you bring yourself to pursue that which your heart pulls you to pursue, you'll have those moments of defeat where you're mad at yourself for leaving the comfort and safety of your previous world. You'll have times where you have no idea what to do, where you feel alone or stuck or unsure. The difference will be whether you see this as the invite you've been waiting for or the reason to turn around and settle for less. That's the question. How do you internalize all that emotion that will feel like it is consuming you? I couldn't believe how strong that temptation was to go back, nagging at me every day. Just come off the edge. Just be comfortable again. But as my old coach would say in college, when we're doing wall sits or something physically taxing, 15 seconds. You can do anything for 15 seconds. And isn't life just a culmination of 15-second windows? It's compartmentalizing the process. It's turning the difficult into the advantageous. You have the ability to not think like everyone else. You have it within you to rewire your previous conceptions of the world, to see darkness not as your reason to hide from conjured up monsters, but as your invitation to become the light. Remember that the best way to be more is to have the courage to put your back against the wall. And you won't want to in the moment. There will never be a perfect time. But committing to that vulnerability will release from within you the power, the strength, the greatness that has been for so long tucked away. By moving into the chaos, you are simultaneously creating the calm you always dreamed of. You're realizing the possibility that just needed the door left ajar to make its way into your world. All right, well, that concludes this episode. I want to thank you for watching. Let me know your takeaways in the comments. Always love to engage down there and hear what you guys are thinking. If you got value, make sure you like, subscribe, all the things. And hey, looking forward to next time. Appreciate you.